Thank you. Thank you. I want to tell you and share with you my becoming. That's what I've always called it. I was born and reared in a small town in Pennsylvania called Tyrone. And it was small, a lot of different kinds of people. There were Irish, English, Italian, and a few black. Not many African Americans. Not many. But it was a nice little town. Everyone got home, and if they didn't, they left. And it was that simple. I think that in high school, there weren't very many black people like in your class, there might be one or two. And we all got along, and we all worked together. We all lived in the same neighborhood. And if anyone was poor, we were all poor. Anyhow, I can tell you a little bit about my family. I had 4 brothers and 1 sister. My dad was a barber. And of course, because there were not many black people in Tyrone, he did not cut black hair. He had all white trade. He grew up there, so he knew everyone. And everyone knew him and knew us. And I'm not going to tell you the one who was me. I got in a lot of trouble. I was not a perfect child. My sister was good. My brothers, I don't know, I guess they were good. But I had fun. And I loved my childhood growing up because all the neighbors knew all the children. Now, if you really did something really bad, my dad always had been first in the barber shop. And we would sit down to dinner and he would clear his throat and kind of look around, and I knew it was going to be about me. And most times it was. But anyhow, some of the time was funny. We lived near Tyrone and Altoona, Pennsylvania, where that was a big railroad center. So there were railroad tracks and trains everywhere. And to this day, I love trains with all my heart. So anyhow, a lot of the trains that would come in, I mean, this was like half a mile away, but they would bring cattle into the slaughterhouses. I loved to be around when those trains came in. Now I'm telling you, it was about half a mile. And I would go. And the railroad police, my dad cut his hair. He said, you know, JB, you need to tell Edna to stay away from those boxcars with that cattle. And my dad would tell me. I tried. So one time, I was getting out of the boxcar and I saw him coming. And I thought, I can outrun him. Because he had a big fat belly. This is my first story. Anyhow, I jumped out of the boxcar and I started running, and I did outrun him. So he went in the barber shop and told my dad. So my dad said, I want to talk to you alone after dinner. So we went in the living room, we had to sit in. We went in there, he said, you know, I told you to stay away from those boxcars. I said, yeah, you did. So-and-so, I forget the name, so-and-so told me he saw you getting out of the boxcar and you ran. I said, I did. And I said, Dad, no, I didn't call him Dad, I was calling him JB. We decided that was a good thing to do, my sister and I. He didn't mind. Anyhow, I said, JB, I outran him. I'm not going to lie to you. I did get in the boxcar. He said, you're bragging about outrunning him? I said, yes. I never did it again. I never did it again. That anyone knew about. Okay? So that was how I grew up. My sister was kind of quiet. I never was. I had friends and we did everything. In Tyrone, I don't know whether any of you would be old enough to remember this, but there was a group called the Fred Waring and the Pennsylvanians. Who knows it? Who remembers that? All right. So anyhow, his mother lived in not too far from us, but she always raised these, I don't know what you would call them, little chickens, but they were real pretty and I guess special, and she had these special cages, and she lived kind of on a hill. So this friend of mine, we decided that we were gonna let some of them go. So we went up there and we let some of them go. I don't know why we did. And people came out of the house because they saw us. And we ran like I don't know what. They never caught us. I even remember his name. His name was Benny Bell. And the thing that is so funny is, that morning when I got dressed, I broke the pin on the side of my jeans, and I had a big pin in it. So when I was running, this pin came open and was sticking me in the side, but I still had to run. So when I told my mother, she said, "See, God told you." You probably did. Anyhow, that was only one of the things you did. That wasn't so bad. They got all the birds and took them back. My dad was a musician. He played several instruments, and he loved jazz and
Mike.
he loved jazz and he loved classical music. So every evening he would get this radio station, I don't know what it was, to play classical music, and we learned to really love classical music. I did. I love it today. Now my mother liked literature. She liked reading. So she read all the time. We had many books, and we always had two newspapers, the Philadelphia Inquirer, and of course the local paper, Time and Day, you know. And so we would read the papers in the evening, and we would discuss what was going on. Now, there wasn't much going on in Tyrone. Philadelphia was a little different. And then my mother would, when she read to us every night when we were growing up. So we all learned to love books, and we had a lot of books in our house. So it was kind of a quiet, nice way to grow up. What is really funny sometimes when I think about it, only 2 people had a telephone in our neighborhood. So if you got a call, they sent their child to tell you, my mother was Mrs. Martin, my brother was in college. Mrs. Martin, you have a telephone call from Fletcher. It was my oldest brother. So she would go down to that house and listen to that call and discuss, you know. So that tells you everyone in Tyrone knew your business. Everyone. And they would ask, we're going to see my mother later. Well, how's Fletcher getting along? Are his grades good? Will he be home this weekend? They knew everything about him. Now the rest of the business came into the water shop. So everyone knew everyone's business. My mother decided that my sister and I were going to be registered nurses. There was no argument, no question, no discussion. Because if you're a registered nurse, you get married, your husband dies, you take care of your children. Okay, that was fine, so we didn't argue, we did it. So then, when we got home that first year, my sister was a year ahead of me. And my mother said, I forget what this doctor's name was, he was a surgeon. And he told my mother, Dolly and Edna should spend at least 1 year working in Tyrone Hospital because they were born near Tyrone and they go to Tyrone. And that's what we did. We worked a year in Tyrone Hospital because that's what was expected of us. I know that sounds crazy. I see the expected. We did it. My sister stayed longer than I did. My brother called and said, I think you should get Edna out of town. She needs to come to the city. He was living in Montgomery, New Jersey. I was glad. I had always, even though my brother was born, I thank him for getting me out of Tyrone. So anyhow, I went to New Jersey. I went to Montclair. And he said, well, you're going to have to find your own job because I'm busy. So I got out, I got on the bus, and I went all through downtown Newark, and I found this little hospital was in a section called Little Italy, all Italian. So I went in there and I met the director of nursing, her name was Miss Pastor. And I told her who I was, and I was looking for a job, and she said, what have you done? And I told her I did med surg, and I was at town hospital, and worked, and all that. She said, well, I need a supervisor of the newborn nursery. Well, I love babies. So that's what I did. I took care of these babies in this newborn nursery, and of course I helped in the delivery room. So I stayed there for a couple of years, and then I got a message from someone about the VA hospital in East Orange, New Jersey. They were hiring and paying much better. I need to tell you that my salary in Tyrone was $98 for 2 weeks. $98. That's unheard of today, isn't it? Isn't that awful? Anyhow, I did it. But I went to the VA because they were paying more money, and it was just something new. So the director, the chief nurse, she asked me what I wanted to do, and I said, well, I don't know, what do you got? And she said, well, we have med surg, we have psych, and they didn't have ER. She said, but we have rehab. I had never done that, I didn't even know what it was. I said, okay, I'll try that. So they sent me to this rehabilitation unit. And I loved it because we took care of amputees, we took care of paraplegics, quadriplegics, all we had. Most of them were war vets. That's the other thing I like. Men are easier to take care of than women. I'm sorry, women, but it's the truth. A man appreciates anything you do for him. Women tell you what to do and how to do it. Sorry. Anyhow, I loved it there. I met my husband there. He was a therapist. And he would come up and talk to me, and I turned my back. I just wasn't interested. Because I had told all my family, I'm never getting married. Never. Never. I didn't want to get married. So they all said, okay. So then when I met him and we were dating, I was getting ready to go into the Air Force. And I thought, let me hold up and see where this is going to go. So he said to me, I said to him, don't get serious because I don't want to marry you. I don't want to get married. He said, okay. So then one day we were downtown, he said, let's go in this store and look at rings. Well, I like jewelry. So we went in and looked at rings, and he got one for me. And I thought, well, maybe I will marry him. So I called my mother and dad. I said, guess what? I'm engaged. So I heard my mother say, Jamie, get down here. Edna said she's engaged. He was upstairs. We had a phone by then. So he comes down, he said, you told your mother you're engaged? I said, yes. He said, you're engaged like to be married? I said, yes. He said, but I thought you said, I know what I said to you. But I'm telling you, I'm getting married. So I did. So after we were married for a year, one night my husband said to me, I've always wanted to be a veterinarian. And I thought, oh God, where is this again? So he said, we can go to Tuskegee, Alabama. Now, I had never been south. I had been to Philadelphia. I had been to Pittsburgh. I had been to Harrisburg. And that was it. So when I told my parents that, they were extremely upset. This was 1963. Does anyone know what was going on in this country in 1963? Put your hand up. Thank you. So we went down to Tuskegee. Well, I got used to it. What I had to get used to is being so outspoken. I mean, that was difficult, but I did it, because that's the way I am. I am a person who likes justice, and I'm going to say it if I think it. Anyhow, I went to a rehab unit when I could transfer. So I was on this rehab unit. President Kennedy was the president who changed where veterans went. At one time, all black veterans went to the hospital in Tuskegee. He changed it. You went to the hospital that was in your region. So we started getting white patients. And most of them were okay. Their families were not. So I spent a lot of time in the chief nurse's office. Because when they didn't like something or they didn't like me, I told them about it. Now we had carts that we gave medication, okay? So the white patients would never say your name. They would walk up to you and say, I want my pills. I turned my back. So they reported me to their family. The family reported me to the chief nurse, and the chief nurse called me into his office. It was a man. And by the way, he was from Michigan. So anyhow, he said, Mrs. Shelton, you're a lawyer, aren't you? I said, yeah, I am. So he said, the families are complaining because she told me what it was about the name thing. I said, look, I have this name tag right here. It says, Ebony Shelton, RN, staff nurse. Either they can't read or whatever. The families can't read. And I said, and I have a white cap, black stripes, an RN, white uniform, white stockings, white shoes. Either they can't read or they're blind. He said to me, Mrs. Shelton, go back to your unit. I don't want to see you anymore. So I did see him for a couple times later. But I got along with the patients because I decided that even though they acted like that, I didn't have to. And so what I would do when they would walk up to me, I would say, my name is Mrs. Shelton. And who are you? And so I can give you the proper medication. We got along well after that. But I had to change the way I was doing things. And I think that was the beginning of me learning about being a deacon. I believe that was all, I didn't know it, but it taught me how to do things in a different kind and loving way. Because at first I was really angry. But I need to tell you this too. My grandmother was an evangelist. She was a very powerful woman. She was a healer. And when she laid her hands on you, she always put oil on her hands, and she would put her hands on you and pray for you, and you were healed. I loved her, and I would travel with her because I didn't know, this fascinated me, the things that she did. So anyhow, when Bob finished the School of Veterinary Medicine, we didn't know where to go, so we went to Pennsylvania with my parents. And there was a veterinarian at the time, his name was Dr. Babe. and he wanted Bob to take over his practice. But he did large animal. Bob said, no, I don't do large animal, I'm a small animal. So the dean of the school called and said, there's a practice for sale in Detroit. So that's how I got to Detroit. And my mother kept saying, I want you to find a church. So every time she called, I'd say, go and find one, an Episcopal church. So finally she said, I'm coming out to Detroit. And she did. So we're driving around. She said, there's the church, St. Timothy's. So she said, we'll go there Sunday. So we did. And that's why I really knew that God was calling me to holy orders. I did everything. I helped patients with rides. I helped in the kitchen. I belonged to St. Anne's Guild. I was a Eucharistic minister. I was a lay minister. I made visits with the priest because I was a nurse. When I visited people in the hospital, in their homes, I saw other needs. And the people in my congregation asked the bishop if I could be ordained a deacon. And that's how I got to be a deacon. And I never looked back. There's a lot, I have something I want to say, and it's true. God calls you. It's up to you to answer. You hear it. I heard it. And then I didn't really understand what a deacon was. Of course, I went to seminary and I found out. But I did not really understand what I would become. But I was open and willing to follow wherever God was leading me. And I went to some strange places. First, I went to St. Martha's Episcopal Church. It was founded, I guess you'd call it, because the Ford family was very prominent in that parish. Martha and Henry were buried on the front lawn. Martha and Henry Ford. And I don't know, but we started talking about healing. And I joined St. Luke's, what was it called? St. Luke's ministry. The Order of St. Luke, yeah. And I joined that, and that was really what made me aware of, I can do this, but what I need to do is I need to train other people. And that's what I did. I got up at church one day and I said, you know, I'm going to be doing a ministry in healing, and I need some people to come with me. And all these people stood up and I said, whoa. It was really wonderful. So I got some literature, and we talked about being a healing ministry, being part. We called it St. Martha's Healing Ministry Team. I see someone yawning. Should I stop? I'm almost finished. But St. Martha's, and one day we were talking because we had a minister or a priest who came in because our priest was ill. And we did this little healing thing. And he said, well, that's what you do here. And I said, yes. And he said to me, tell me about your family. I told him about my grandmother. And he took my hands and held them. And he said, Edna, you have your grandmother's healing hands. And don't you forget it. And don't you neglect it. Always be a healer. I never forgot that man. His name was Father Okansanya. He was from Africa. But he told me that, and I loved my grandmother, and I thought about her, and even now, I dream about my grandmother and her healing. And I look at my hands. So, healing is wonderful. A nurse is the healer. You can be healers. So, excuse me, there's a lot of work to be done. A lot of work. And one of the biggest jobs that has to be done is people need to help and heal others. When I see people at Kaiser, I have Kaiser Healthcare, and that's a big place. Sometimes I'm sitting there watching people, I can feel their pain. And I go over and I say, how are you today? How are you feeling? Yesterday it was a man, he had his head down. I knew that man was in pain. So I just went over. I just did that. And I said, you're in pain, aren't you? He said, yes, I have a terrible pain. And I said, would you like me to pray for you? And that's what I did. And that's what I do. I did it in the grocery store, and everyone stopped and looked at us. I said, that's okay. I'm still. And the lady I prayed for cried because she was in pain. Amen. I have three sons. I'm not finished. Yeah. She told me 15 minutes.